Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Quick look here once more at the crypto market overview. We got a really big day ahead of us here with FOMC here in a short while. Perhaps by the time you watch this video, you'll actually see the results on the charts and how crazy and wonky it gets. So if you are watching before that happens here in another hour or two, I highly recommend just kind of sitting on the sidelines, maybe waiting it out and not trading too much into it. It's just generally best practice. We're going to look at some order books here today, kind of see where the largest amount of positions are available for Bitcoin. Maybe a comparative analysis with Bitcoin and specific altcoins, kind of see how they favor. Liquidation data as well as a liquidation map, of course, just kind of giving us perspective on the heaviest concentrations of liquidation. And then once more, of course, our crypto market overview and a Bitcoin detailed analysis with some altcoins included. We'll go ahead and take a closer look at that and much more. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before we jump into some of this awesome backend data, let's go ahead and just quickly remind you, FOMC meeting is here shortly. It is at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can click on the link that I reposted on my website. You can essentially click on watch live, go to their YouTube video if you want, and pretty much to see how crazy, once he starts speaking, the markets go, right? So keep in mind, that is kind of happening here in the relative near future. So just be mindful of that. And without further ado, let's go ahead and double check a couple of things in the back end here. First of all, I like to touch on Bitcoin and Ethereum order blocks here, or order books, basically kind of just identifying the key levels here. And these are like the larger positions. So I just want to kind of point this out here. We have a pretty significant sell order, basically an ask order, 117,000. That is an easy round number to remember. That's kind of the largest amount. We can also see 114,450 to the downside. That's a big order for the buys. So basically just telling us that if we enter either of these two zones, which is distinct likelihood today, then we're going to see that order quickly filled and the price likely reverse itself or turn around or pivot at that moment for a short while. Okay, left-hand side kind of shows us where we have the most amount of interest here, basically 115,700. There's a lot of buying pressure in that 115.7 range here. So that kind of lets us know that this current price point is heavily guarded. Let's go ahead and take a look at some back-end liquidation data, kind of get the baseline here of what's, the ratios of these coins here that we're looking at. And Ethereum, first and foremost, we have just as many longs as we do shorts in the last 24 hours. So that tells us we have a significant amount of interest in the current range of 4,500. We'll talk about that here in a bit. When we look at Bitcoin, of course, we can see a little bit more shorts liquidated than longs. People expecting the price to go down, getting stopped out there. And then just generally speaking, with most altcoins, we're seeing more longs getting destroyed than shorts, implying that a lot of altcoins are pulling back. And that'll tie into our overall Bitcoin dominance or altcoin dominance equation as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. And just to touch on this liquidation map here too, this just kind of gives us the outliers from a big picture perspective. We have the most amount of liquidation at 117,750. So 117,750 is effectively that highest point there. We see the price rise up to that level. We may see a short squeeze and the price continue further up. Furthermore, the alternative there, roughly 109,109.2, is that lower area of liquidation. So the longs feel much more confident with their liquidation levels much further away than the shorts do at this point. So once more, kind of emphasizing the fact that we maybe want to be careful shorting this coin at this exact moment. So those are just kind of some outliers that help us understand what's going on in the back end. Fear and greed index hasn't changed too much. We don't need to talk about that. Altcoin season index is roughly the same here. We're still in that 1.7 trillion range. So that's a good sign, implying that we have a lot of market liquidity essentially in crypto altcoins, essentially just letting us know that people are buying these dips. So even though there's liquidations that keep occurring, the overall premise is that we're going to continue higher and that majority of these altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin right now. So that's a very good sign. We have very few altcoins underperforming right now. So it kind of just tells us, hey, altcoins are here to stay and we're looking good. Obviously, that's just the top 100 coins. You go a little bit further down the rabbit hole, it may change essentially for that. But obviously, in any normal circumstance, you're probably going to be wanting to invest more so in the top 100. I don't necessarily recommend anything lower than that in general, just as a safety or a rule of thumb, right? To be safe, if you will. All right, so let's take a look here at the back end here. First things first, we're just going to quickly touch on the average top trader. And these are just traders that use large position sizing, right? And right now we can see that they are essentially taking more longs than shorts, right? So they're more heavy on the longs. We can also see short delta here. Sorry, correction. This is the overall delta of position for margin. So basically telling us that it's kind of plateauing, nothing super stark or changing here, big contrast there at this point. But the overall sentiment is that when that remains high, which it still is, there's more success to the upside. So far we've been able to identify with liquidation data that Bitcoin is more likely or incentivized to go higher. Obviously, we have to have some good news here today with the FOMC for that to occur. So be mindful of that happening. Now, what this is here, this is just a quick summary of what's going on with volume, and these are positions. So we have $0 to $1,000 positions increasing. So these are more retail. These are basically people like you and I, essentially. We've got in the middle here, these are kind of the larger position sizing here. This is more institutional here, letting us know institutional traders are starting to pick up the volume. We have significantly larger positions here. This is basically $100,000 positions, or in that range of 10 to 100,000. And then these are the whale traders here. So they're more active than usual right now, and that's a very good sign. So ultimately, the larger the position size, the more likelihood of sustainability in these price points, because they know something we don't. That's kind of the concept there. All right, so take a look here on the right-hand side. Open interest for Bitcoin this last 30 days of trading. We can see 113,000 is that newer, more relevant open interest area. And I say newer because within the last couple of weeks that's been forming and is starting to reinforce itself as a support. So if we do see that price point occur in the near future, that would be an excellent place to consider a long, just based on that being a macro support. Liquidation long delta is still high, implying it's probably not a good idea to try to short into this. And we see here as well with liquidation, once more, that 117,750 range right here, you can see that pretty much emphasized on the charts. We got a lot of liquidation there. So that's roughly about, in the range of about 3 billion there. So all this stuff kind of combined lets us know there's more incentive for the price to go higher than lower for Bitcoin. Okay. So the key today, I would say, is to identify after FOMC, which coins are responding well, responding well with Bitcoin versus the inverse. Now, in other words, we don't want to be trying to invest in coins that are underperforming right now versus Bitcoin, because the likelihood of them pumping with Bitcoin is pretty low, and the inverse applies as well, where they're going to pull back twice as hard as Bitcoin if they're underperforming as well. So those are just things I try to look for when I trade altcoins. I like to see the unique pairing between the coins, because a lot of coins will follow suit. They'll follow Bitcoin like a lost puppy. And then the ones that are just like, no, I don't care what Bitcoin does. Those are ones you generally want to trade because they have an established direction regardless. Okay. All that said, Bitcoin, daily time frame, what are we looking at here? Well, simply put, we are in a position right now where we're starting to see some interesting, I wouldn't say diversions, but we do have a potential bearish engulfing candle. We'll see here soon, obviously, how the daily closes. We close below 115.4, then I would say 113 to 114K range is more likely. If we do take a look at these order blocks, we can see once more 114,500 is that heavy concentration of orders there. Basically, there's $45 million in orders that want to be filled at that level. So that would imply we see a little bit of a bounce there. So that's right there at the bottom of this local fair value gap that was already mostly filled. So that leads me to believe that we'll see a pivot there. We may not even see 113K. So I'd be interested in 114.5 based on that metric alone. Do we trade only on one thing? No, but generally speaking, those are things I like to look for. All that said, everything else is kind of diverging on the daily. While we're still a good macro structure, we're still above our support. We're over 50 on the RSI. We've got momentum shifting indicators letting us know that further downside is possible. Once more, at this point, we had an overextension recently, but the longer we spend in this range, the more likely we are to leg up. So I would still say that this is a slightly more bullish scenario here for Bitcoin than it would be the other way around. Okay, so 4-hour time frame also reflecting positivity here, being above all moving averages. Once more, we have confluence here with our larger moving average and that previous previous resistance, churn support. 113 was a consistent resistance level. And if you didn't catch it too, I was talking about this previously. We had a cup and handle pattern here. The price broke out through that level. So that cup and handle resistance essentially hasn't been retested as new support. So once more, my thought process is 113 to 114.5 is that nice desirable range for a long on Bitcoin if we see that. So that's kind of the concept there. Okay, 4-hour time frame to summarize here. Still looking good on moving averages, but we are starting to diverge here. We're seeing 50 on the RSI being retested, and we're losing our MACD and diverging. So the 4-hour is technically shifting bearish. While we are still establishing higher highs and higher lows, it's not the most comfortable scenario to trade into. So I feel mostly bullish on the back end data with everything. I think we're more likely to go higher. But when it comes to a shift in momentum in the 4-hour time frame, we're starting to lose steam here, and we are starting to see that early indication of reversal. So do with that what you will. Why don't you comment below too? Let me know, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts here on Bitcoin? I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here next at our altcoins. Just before we take a look at the next altcoin, I want to recommend you consider trading with Bitunix. If you use my link to register down below or have in the past, you'll always be eligible for future trading competitions, but this one is awesome. It's probably the best one I've seen yet, with a full-on $16,000 individual prize pool, as well as a collective prize pool as well for the top 30 traders. Be sure to check out the link down below for more information. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at Ethereum. Let's start with the order books here. Just really quick perspective here. There's a pretty significant amount of interest at 4460. So that is kind of that fib level, that local support range for us, and kind of letting us know that in general, that should be the local bottom here, pending we don't have any crazy basis point Fed rate stuff going on. Future reference too, in case you didn't notice this, I posted this here just a moment ago. Someone just placed a $500,000 bet on the likelihood of a Fed meeting taking a 50 basis point interest rate cut. That is quite interesting. I hope that pays out for you just because, right? So take a look here at the backend data for Ethereum. Let's quickly note a couple of things here first, and just recognizing, obviously, we have a significant amount of open interest there at 4,500. That is essentially that battleground, right? We can see a lot of accumulation in that current range. We zoom in a little bit, this last 7 days worth of open interest. Once more, that 4440 level still holding strong, okay? 12 billion liquidation short delta, so more bears than bulls right now. And we also have more downside potential here at 4350 to 4400 for the amount of liquidation in that range. So hypothetically, we could get further downside based on the overall support levels here, or sorry, if that support loss occurs. So 4440 doesn't hold, I think 4350 seems like a practical next consideration there. Taking a look here at the 4-hour time frame, let's zoom out to the daily first and just quickly recognize here that from a macro perspective, ETH is still looking good based on support levels below the price. We also can see, of course, there is a liquidation short delta coming down, basically letting us know that for the most part, we have divergences here, plus that short delta, kind of letting us know that further continuation lower is higher, but we do once more have a lot of support in that range. So I know it seems very conflicting, and that's generally what it is. And oftentimes you don't want to trade into that, right? When there's like, a lot of things pointing up, a lot of things pointing down, best to stick on the sidelines until more things point up, more things point down. In that case here, 4-hour time frame, see if there's any significant divergence or convergence. We're still establishing lower highs and lower lows based on the 20-day SMA. We can also recognize here too that we're still under 50 on the RSI. So even though ETH keeps trying to break bullish, it hasn't done so yet. I would at the very least wait for Ethereum to surpass its descending trend line here and to close above that $4,500 support range. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm hoping to see in the relative near future. And at this point, I think it's best to maybe just kind of avoid taking a trade on this coin just for the moment. Let's go ahead and move on to Solana, see kind of where we're at here on the back end. So starting with the backend data here for Solana, 235 is that open interest area here. So that's kind of the local resistance for us. We can also recognize liquidation delta here is quite break even. In other words, it's at this transitionary state. In other words, we've spent a lot of times in this range, this 230 to 235 range, and it's a very highly contested location. Okay, and what that basically just means is that we have decent potential for the price to go either up or down. I know that sounds crazy because you come here for answers, but I'm not going to tell you that it's going to go up or down based on one thing. That being said, with what we see so far, we're at a transitionary state, potentially going to break lower because we are in a bearish type of rectangle pattern, and we do have more liquidation on the downside. So 225 to 230, I think a quick wick down would make perfect sense for Solana. Let's take a look at the daily time frame and just kind of recognize once more we're pretty well overextended. Continuation lower would make sense. We have a fair value gap as low as 230. I'm still interested in the 220 to 230 range as a long position. I've talked about that majority of this week here. It may or may not happen, but if it does, I'll be happy to welcome that with open arms. Right? We take a look here though. A lot of diverging signs here early, kind of letting us know that we are shifting momentum. However, we're still mostly on the right side of tracks. We still got good bullish momentum. So it's once more kind of one of those unique times to trade. It's hard to want to take a trade at this exact level based on the fact that we're massively overextended and we got a lot of volume above us. And we also have liquidation below the price. FOMC coming up here. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here. So the concept here remains the same. We are seeing a compression here in this range. We got the upper range here of approximately 238, and then the lower range here of about 233. So it's very, very common for these type of ranges to break down versus breaking up, just based on the fact that it derives from the upside. So the general consensus is that we're going to be ranging and we're going to continue lower. We're still in a descending type of trend, lower highs and lower lows. From a macro perspective, perspective. So once more, you presume the trend will continue to the downside because that's just the statistical favorability. That's the concept here. But obviously, if you look at the 4-hour time frame, we're still under 50 on the RSI while money flow index is shifting. That's an early indication of a reversal. It's not enough to warrant a long position. Okay, so I would hesitate to take along with Solana until after the Fed meeting, just to kind of see what the baseline is for the market. Quick heads up to my traders, make sure you take full advantage of this offer here from Bitunix. There's a significant deposit reward bonus as well as a $16,000 individual reward for just trading on the exchange. If you use my link to register in the past, you're automatically eligible. If you use my link to register now, you're eligible for all future trading bonuses and competitions. Check out the links down below for more information. Let's move on to Solana. Sorry, that is Solana. Let's move on to SUI and go ahead and double check some back-end stuff here and recognize that 360 range held like a champ as a resistance. I was very tempted to consider a short position at level and instead consider shorting XRP. I'll explain more so about why XRP should diverge here or continue lower, but between now and then, we do have a support range here at 353 for open interest on the SUI chart. So that's positive here. You can also recognize liquidation deltas at $500 million to the downside. So more people shorting SUI than taking longs. And if we look in the last 7 days here, there's a lot more liquidation on the downside between 330 and 340. So I'm still interested in a position between 330 and 340 if we see that level occur and Bitcoin is not, just taking a swan dive to the downside, right? We want to make sure that. But if we do see Bitcoin retest the 113 to 114.5 range, there's a solid chance that this level of 330 to 340 should hold for SUI. Now let's take a look here at the daily time frame and recognize a couple of things first of all, and just kind of note from here where we're at. So first of all, in the daily time frame, we're maintaining above all moving averages. So the macro, in a sense, is positive for SUI. But we keep retesting this 50 on the RSI, kind of letting us know that potential shift in momentum is happening. And we've got our momentous indicators letting us know further downside is probable. So statistically, we are kind of at a 50-50 flip of a coin on the daily time frame. And those aren't the kind of odds you really want to look into or trade into. Technically, we're establishing higher highs lower highs with higher lows. So we got to kind of wait a little bit longer to see how this little progression works first. But generally speaking, we're still in an ascending trend, but we're below a lot of moving averages, under 50 in the RSI. There's a lot more momentous indications and or loss of supports or rejections off resistances here for SUI to not really want to take a long position into this. So to me, I would hesitate and wait. I'm still waiting for that 330 to 340 mark, and that may never happen. I'm perfectly fine with missing that opportunity if it never occurs. But I'd love to take that opportunity if it does happen because there's a ton of support in that lower range. And once that level of liquidation is swept, there's a good chance we continue higher. All right, so let's take a look here at XRP, kind of double check. This coin is actually showing a lot of strength in the low $3 range. So that has changed a little bit since yesterday, but we're still in a bearish type of pattern here, which once more, not the reason to take a trade on it, but it is incentivizing because it does tell us that there's a decent chance we have a fake out here soon. So let's take a look here at open interest and kind of recognize in the last 7 days, we got 306 and 303 as those two heavy concentrations of open interest above the price. And right here at 302 and 3 even just below. So we're kind of right in the middle of that. We can see liquidation short deltas at 1 billion. That's quite high for XRP. And we have a lot of liquidation that's actually recently come into play here. In other words, this upper area between 306 and 310 wasn't there yesterday. Today, we can see that exists as well as, of course, the previous 295 to 290. So we got these chunks of liquidation above the price and below the price. We're technically closer to the upper range, so we may see a short squeeze because of that. In fact, if we look at the 4-hour time frame here, you can see there's a lot more strength here from XRP in the relative recent past. One of the few coins doing well today. Okay. Now, when we take a look at the daily, we want to recognize here that there is somewhat of a fair value gap upwards about 308. So that could incentivize the price to hit that $310 resistance range / liquidation. And then, of course, we double check here. We're still above 50 in the RSI. Money flow index is a little high. So the macro structure for XRP is looking pretty decent. When we take a look at the 4-hour time frame, we want to talk about this here because this does have potential convergences. Now, we are stuck under 50 in the RSI yesterday. Now we're breaking above with money flow index increasing and stochastic swinging up. So these are all little early signs of reversal, and there's more potential for further upside for XRP at this point. So if you are considering a short on XRP, I'd maybe consider waiting on doing so. Obviously, we want to see where the Fed meeting goes first, but at this point here, we're looking like there's a potential reversal on our hands here for XRP. So if that is the case and you're in a short, consider closing or flipping, hitting that old reverse button. But once more, I don't recommend any of that until FOMC is said and done and the dust is settled. We always want to understand the direction of the trend. Right now, the macro structure is telling us that we're going to go up on the short term for Bitcoin, but also we're still in a lower high, lower low pattern. So there's a lot of funkiness right now in the charts. It's really difficult to trade these kind of conditions, but it'll be a lot easier to trade once we have a better direction. We should know that here soon. So I hope it goes well for you. Be very careful trading into the FOMC. Thanks again for being a phenomenal part of my life, and we'll look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.